Darkness fell upon the old Victorian house like a shroud. The full moon, a giant eye in the sky, cast long, eerie shadows from the gnarled branches of the ancient oak tree. Wind howled through the broken windows, mimicking the cries of a tormented soul. We stood there, 5 friends, facing our fear. The house, perched atop a hill overlooking the town, had been empty for over a century. Locals whispered tales of a family massacre, their spirits forever trapped within its decaying walls. No one dared to venture near except for us. We were young, foolish, and drawn to the unknown. It started as a dare, a test of courage on Halloween night. "I bet you won't last 5 minutes inside," smirked Jake, his eyes gleaming with mischief. We all knew the stories, the legends passed down through generations, but none of us truly believed them. Until now. The old iron gate creaked open with a groan, as if warning us to turn back. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I glanced back at my friends, their faces pale in the moonlight, their bravado fading with each step we took towards the house. We were in too deep to back out now. The air grew heavy as we approached the front porch, the temperature dropping significantly. A musty, damp smell wafted from within, the scent of decay and forgotten memories. The wooden floorboards groaned under our weight as we cautiously stepped inside. The darkness inside was absolute, the only light coming from the moonbeams filtering through the boarded-up windows. The air was thick with a palpable sense of dread, as if the house itself was watching us, its unseen occupants stirring from their slumber. We huddled closer, our breaths shallow and quick. We were no longer just friends on a dare, but intruders in a sacred, haunted space. A blood-curdling scream shattered the silence, echoing through the empty halls. It was a scream so piercing, so filled with terror, that it seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the old abandoned house. The sound bounced off the cracked, peeling wallpaper and reverberated down the long, dark corridor, making it impossible to tell where it had come from. My blood ran cold, my heart leaping into my throat. I could feel the icy grip of fear tightening around my chest, making it hard to breathe. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to get out of that house as fast as I could, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. We spun around, searching for the source of the scream, our eyes wide with terror. The shadows seemed to dance and flicker in the dim light, playing tricks on our minds. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, made us jump and look over our shoulders. We were on edge, our nerves frayed to the breaking point. "It's just an owl," stammered Emily, her voice trembling, but her words did little to calm our frayed nerves. We all knew that no owl could make a sound like that. The fear in her eyes mirrored our own, and we clung to each other, seeking comfort in the presence of our friends. The air grew colder, a bone-chilling cold that seemed to seep into our very bones. Our breath came out in visible puffs, hanging in the air like ghostly apparitions. The temperature seemed to drop with every passing second, and we huddled together for warmth, our teeth chattering uncontrollably. We could hear the sound of whispers, faint and indistinct, swirling around us like a malevolent wind. The voices seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, filling the room with an eerie, otherworldly presence. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, my every instinct screaming at me to turn and run. But something held me there, rooted to the spot. It was a feeling of dread, a sense that if I moved, if I made a sound, whatever was lurking in the shadows would come for me. We stood there, frozen in fear, waiting for the next scream to pierce the darkness. Then we heard it, the slow, deliberate sound of footsteps descending the grand staircase in the foyer. Heavy, measured steps, as if someone or something was making its way towards us. We huddled closer, our eyes fixed on the top of the stairs, our breaths held captive in our chests. A cold wind swept through the house, extinguishing our only candle and plunging us into absolute darkness. We were engulfed by an impenetrable blackness, the silence now deafening. It was then that the fear took hold, paralyzing us with its icy grip. We were trapped, alone in the darkness with whatever lurked in the shadows. Suddenly, a hand shot out from the darkness, grabbing Emily's arm. She screamed again, a high-pitched wail that pierced the night. We stumbled back in terror, falling over each other in our haste to escape. Adrenaline surged through my veins as I scrambled to my feet and ran towards the front door, my friends close behind. We didn't stop running until we were safely outside, the old iron gate slamming shut behind us. We stood there for a moment, gasping for breath, our hearts pounding in our chests. The house loomed over us, its dark windows seeming to watch us, daring us to return. The next morning, the local news reported that Emily was missing. The news anchor's voice was somber as she relayed the details, her face reflecting the gravity of the situation. Emily, a bright and cheerful girl, had vanished without a trace, leaving her family and friends in a state of shock and despair. The community was in an uproar, with everyone wondering how such a thing could happen in their quiet town. The police searched the house and the surrounding woods, but they found no trace of her. They combed through every inch of the forest, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they called out her name. The old house, with its creaking floors and eerie atmosphere, was thoroughly examined, but it yielded no clues. The search extended into the night, with officers tirelessly working to uncover any sign of Emily. They treated it as a runaway case, assuming she had gotten scared and fled into the night. The detectives discussed various theories, jotting down notes and piecing together the puzzle. Patrol cars roamed the streets, their lights flashing as they kept an eye out for any sign of the missing girl. Despite their efforts, the case seemed to be at a standstill, with no new leads emerging. But we knew the truth. We had been there that night, and we had seen things that the police couldn't even begin to imagine. The whispers among our friends grew louder, and the fear in our eyes was unmistakable. We knew that Emily hadn't just run away. Something far more sinister was at play. We had seen the look of terror on her face, felt the icy grip on her arm. The memory of that night was vivid in our minds, replaying over and over again, Emily's eyes wide with fear and her trembling hands clutching at us for help. It was a sight that haunted us, a reminder of the horror that had unfolded. We knew that something sinister had taken her, something that lurked within the walls of that old, haunted house. The shadows seemed to move on their own, and the air was thick with an unexplainable dread. We had heard the stories about the house, tales of ghostly figures and unexplained noises, but we had never truly believed them until that night. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but there was still no sign of Emily. The calendar pages flipped by, each day a painful reminder of her absence. Missing person flyers were plastered all over town, but they began to fade and tear as time went on. The old house, now abandoned and overgrown, stood as a silent witness to the tragedy. The guilt and grief gnawed at us, the memory of that night forever seared into our minds. We couldn't shake the feeling that we had failed her, that we should have done more to protect her. The sorrow was palpable and the tears flowed freely as we clung to each other for comfort. The weight of our loss was almost too much to bear. We had gone to the house seeking a thrill, a test of courage, but we had found something far more sinister than we could have ever imagined. The thrill-seeking adventure had turned into a nightmare, and the house that we had once seen as a mere curiosity had revealed its dark and terrifying secrets. We had ventured into the unknown, and we had paid the price. The memory of that night would forever haunt us, a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. A year passed. The memory of that night still haunted me. I could still hear Emily's scream echoing in my ears. I had tried to move on, to forget, but the house and what we had experienced there held me captive. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself drawn back to the house. I stood there, staring up at its darkened windows, the wind whispering through the trees, sounding like Emily's voice calling my name. I knew then that I couldn't escape the past, that I had to go back inside and face my fears. I slowly pushed open the creaking iron gate, the sound echoing through the still night air. The gate had been there for as long as I could remember, a sentinel guarding the secrets of the old house. Each creak seemed to whisper tales of the past, of moments long forgotten but not entirely erased. I made my way up the overgrown path to the front porch, the tall grass brushing against my legs like ghostly fingers. The path was barely visible, swallowed by nature's relentless reclaiming. Every step felt like a journey back in time to a place where memories lingered in the shadows. As I reached for the doorknob, I saw it, a small, white envelope, its presence both unexpected and foreboding. The envelope seemed out of place, a stark contrast against the weathered wood of the door. It was wedged between the cracks in the wood as if someone had hastily left it there, hoping it would be found by the right person. The envelope seemed to pulse with a life of its own, a silent messenger carrying a weighty secret. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached out and picked it up. The paper felt cold and slightly damp, as if it had absorbed the essence of the night. I could feel the tension in the air, a palpable sense of dread that made my fingers tremble. The handwriting on the front sent shivers down my spine. It was Emily's. Her delicate script was unmistakable, yet there was something off about it, a hurriedness that spoke of fear and urgency. With trembling hands, I tore open the envelope, the sound of ripping paper echoing in the silence. It felt like I was tearing through layers of time, each rip bringing me closer to a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to know. I pulled out a single sheet of paper, its edges frayed and worn. The paper felt fragile, as if it might disintegrate at any moment, taking its secrets with it. The words were scrawled in a shaky hand, the letters uneven and hurried. It was clear that whoever had written this was in a state of distress, their emotions bleeding onto the page. The ink was smudged as if by tears, the stains adding a haunting quality to the already eerie message. It was as if the paper itself had absorbed the sorrow and fear of its writer. "It's not over," the note read. "It's waiting for you." The words seemed to leap off the page, their meaning sinking into my mind like a stone in water. "It's waiting for us all." The finality of the statement was chilling. It was a warning, a prophecy of doom that felt all too real. I looked up at the house, its dark windows staring back at me like empty eyes. The house seemed to be watching, waiting, its presence oppressive and malevolent. The dark windows were like portals to another world, a world where nightmares were real and the past never truly stayed buried. And I knew that Emily was right. The house held a power over us, a grip that we had never truly escaped. We hadn't escaped that night. We had merely postponed the inevitable. The memories of that night came flooding back, the fear, the panic, the sense of being hunted. We had merely postponed the inevitable. The house, with its dark history and malevolent presence, was a force that could not be ignored. The house, and whatever evil lurked within, was waiting. It was patient, biding its time, knowing that we would eventually return, and it wouldn't be long before it came for us all. The sense of impending doom was overwhelming, a shadow that loomed over us, reminding us that some things can never be escaped.